Hello again for the second part of the tutorial how to create a split screen in After Effects. In the first part we kind of did this horizontal split with two different pieces of footage, and what we want to create now is using the same piece of footage, something like this, of the ocean wave that's kind of converging into the middle and adding a bit of a color change effect to one of them. So going back into After Effects, first of all I want to create a new composition again based on the ocean waves this time. So I'm just going to click the ocean waves and then drag it onto that icon that usually creates a new composition, and that way I have a new composition that has exactly the same length and dimensions as the ocean waves footage. And then I'm just going to drag it out here, put it into the compositions folder. And I failed to do this last time. I'm just going to rename it. So I hit enter so I can type anything in. I'm going to call it SplitscreenB Ocean Waves. And for good man, I'm just going to rename the comp we did in the previous one and call it SplitscreenA Speed. Right, so now we're in the ocean waves comp. And first of all, we just need to create another copy of this. And there are lots of different ways of copying stuff in After Effects. Well, in this case I could just drag it into my composition again. I can use the copy and paste command, generally from the computer, so Command C, Command V. But the easiest way in After Effects to duplicate stuff is to hit Command D. I started this document with a couple of shortcuts. So Command D duplicates a lot, like most stuff in After Effects. So I'm just going to select this piece of footage and then hit Command D, and now I just have two identical copies. So first of all, one of them I kind of want to move halfway down here. That's fairly easy. In my stage area I just click and drag it wherever I want. But again, I want it to be flush with the sides. I don't want it to move a pixel off. I don't want kind of these borders. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select it and then hit Shift to move it down. Roughly in the middle. Right. And then my second piece of footage, I kind of want to flip it around so that it's a mirror image of the bottom one. And the way to do that is kind of to change its size for it to be upside down. And I can, of course, within my stage, I can manipulate the size in here. So I can click on one of those corners and try and manipulate it so that it's exactly 100% the opposite, but that's quite tricky to do and it's a bit annoying. And of course there's one way that's a lot more precise to flip it exactly 100%. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned these, but so basically what we need to access is the scale of this object, of this layer, and the way to do that is kind of to click on that arrow there, and then we have the transform properties, and what we want to use is scale. But very often if you have many layers within After Effects and all of them are kind of unfolded like this, it gets a bit messy and it's hard to see what's actually going on. So there's shortcuts to kind of keep your interface clean. And what they are these. They make it really easy to unfold only the properties that you need. And I would really recommend you start using them fairly early in your After Effects practice, because they will save you a lot of hassle and it makes stuff just a lot more, the overview is a lot better. So the shortcut for scale is S. So I'm just going to select my layer and hit S, and all it does is unfolds the scale property. Oops. So now what I want to do is I want to change the Y property to -100. So I'm just going to click onto the second value, so that's X and this is Y. I'm just going to click on there and type in -100. And then drag my footage up here. But what that did basically, because at the moment my dimensions are locked, so it automatically also changed the X value to -100, and that's not really what I want, because I want it to be a perfect mirror image and I don't want it to be also flipped from left to right. So the way to do that, you can see that in front we have this tiny little lock, which also when you hover over it says constraint proportions, and we just want to uncheck that, and that way I can manipulate one dimension over the other. And I'm just going to set the X value back to 100. So now we have a perfect mirror image of the bottom footage. Right, and so I dragged it kind of up here so that they meet in the middle and they create this nice split screen effect. And again, I'm holding Shift just to constrain the movement to 90-degree angles. That's already quite nice, but I want to make it a bit more obvious that it's two different sides. So I want to add a little effect to that top piece of footage, just to change the colors a little bit over time. So I want to make sure that I selected whichever of your layers is the top one. So mine is actually at the moment the bottom layer, which I find slightly confusing because I kind of want my visuals to line up. So I'm just going to drag the bottom one to the top, just so that my top layer responds to the top footage and the bottom one responds to the ones on the bottom, just to make it easier. So now, having the top one selected, that's the one I want to change the color of, I'm going to go to Effect, Color Correction, Hue and Saturation. And what that does is it opens this effects control window up here, and you probably know this from Photoshop again. There's lots of different things I can change. I can change the saturation, I can desaturate it, or oversaturate it, I can make it lighter or darker or whatever. But I'm just going to set all these back to 0. The only thing I want to change is actually the hue. Whichever way you want to go, I'm just going to go towards a slightly purplish scale for this one. So I'm going to go kind of roughly in the middle of my composition, in the middle of my timeline. And as we know that anything in After Effects that has like a little stopwatch symbol in front, we can use to add animation. And in order to create animation of the hue shift, I'm going to click that stopwatch in front of the channel range. Right, at the moment I can't really see my keyframe here. I can see that After Effects added this little dot, but I can't really access my keyframe in case I wanted to change the timing or do anything with it. And that's because the effects are still not unfolded. So I could do this and I could do that and kind of unfold this whole effect, but it has so many properties, which again kind of makes it really annoying to see what's actually going on. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use another shortcut, which is that one. I'm just going to show you the other one as well. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to hit U, and what it does is just going to open up every property that has keyframes on it. So if you have 10 different properties that have keyframe, it will only unfold those and just leave everything else hidden, which makes it really easy to work. So I'm going to select that piece of footage and then hit U, which just unfolds the channel range and everything else stays hidden, which is like a neat way of working. Right, so now I have my keyframe that I can select and kind of change the time off if I really want to. Cool. But what I want to do is I want to change the hue over time. So I'm just going to go to the beginning of my composition and I want to set it back to 0 because I want it to be kind of in sync, look exactly the same, and then slowly start shifting over time until it's very obvious that there's something else going on and there's a split in the visual. But what I also want to make sure is that this whole thing loops from the front to the end. So if now I play the clip, I kind of start in the end and I play it back. And once it jumps to the front, obviously the hue is just kind of going to flip back to the original blue. And also my computer does weird things, so don't worry about that. That's just a playback issue. So what I want to do is I want to copy this keyframe to be in the end as well, just so it kind of shifts towards this purple bit and then shifts back to be blue and normal again. And that way, if it jumps to the beginning again, we have a perfect loop. And of course I could now go back into this effect and change it back to 0, but I might have a keyframe that's a lot more complex with a weird number and I don't want to type it in again. So the easiest way of doing that is just to copy and paste that keyframe. So I'm going to select this keyframe and make sure that I still have it selected when I paste it, and just hit Command C and then Command V, the way you would copy and paste anything on your computer. And you can see, now I have one here and one there, and they're exactly identical. So if I go here, the value, if I go to the end of my comp, the value, oh, it's actually not 0 in the beginning. Interesting. Well, it's 9, that's also fine. So now if I go here, it loops perfectly, whatever the value is, because it's exactly the same. Right, and that's it from this one. I'm just gonna add it to the render queue and render it out again. So I'm gonna go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, and I'm just quickly gonna recap on what I said in the last tutorial about codecs and kind of keeping your file size small. I just rendered the first one that we did twice. Once with the animation codec, which is the lossless codec. So if I click on here, it shows me that at the moment I'm using a codec that's called animation, and that's a really good high quality codec. But if we look at the actual file size in the Finder, if I look at the file size of this one, it's 157 megabyte. And that's a lot because the animation is only 10 seconds long. If you imagine having a 2-hour movie with this compression, it would be huge. If 10 seconds already have 150 megabyte, it would be gigabytes. So then last time we rendered it with the H.264 codec, which is this one. And what it does is just reduces the size extremely down. So that one is 33 megabyte, which is still a lot considering it's a 10-second clip. But you know, if you do lots of renders and kind of test your stuff, you don't want to fill up your hard drive with files that turn out to be gigabytes if the animation turns longer. You want to keep it small and neat. So that's a very good codec to use, the H.264, and we're going to use it again now. So instead of animation, I'm going to click on Format Options and choose H.264, the one that we used last time as well, and hit OK, and that's the only thing we need to change, because it already has a nice name, because I named it my composition, and I just need to define where I want to save it on my hard drive, and that's fine. And then I hit render.